Appreciate you joining me today. We're going to be looking in the book of Colossians. Once again, our hymn today is the hymn, His Yoke is Easy.
I found my Lord and He is my divine love. I serve Him all my years of time and dwell with Him above. His yoke is easy, His burden is light. I found His soul, I found His soul. His presence is my sweetest delight. His blessings never flow.
Okay, we're in Colossians 2. And the New King James heads this as like three different systems. The New King James heads it as not philosophy but Christ, not legalism but Christ, and then chapter 3, not carnality but Christ. And I think sometimes you look at those and it's like, oh, so he's talking about, the Greek philosophers, and then he's talking about the law, and then he's talking about worldliness. It may be slightly different than that because the first one, and this is the one, it uses the word philosophy, but even in Strong's dictionary, it talks about this as pretty much Jewish, Jewish philosophy. And I'll show you as we go along. So, verse 8, beware lest anyone cheat you through philosophy and empty deceit according to the tradition of men, according to the basic principles of the world. Hang on to that thought because you're going to see it come back up again, and not according to Christ. A little later on in the account, it obviously is talking about the law, having wiped out the handwriting of requirements that was against us, which was contrary to us, and he has taken it out of the way, having nailed it to the cross. Writing predominantly to Gentiles, and the handwriting of requirements that was against them, so to speak. It does go on. Let no one judge you in food or drink regarding a festival or Sabbaths or such things as that. And so look at what it says, because this is where that idea comes up again. The way it was set up in verse 8, according to the basic principles of the world. And it's easy to look at that and just because of the word philosophy, think it's talking about something other than the old law. But then in verse 20, therefore, if you died with Christ from the basic principles of the world, why, as though living in the world, do you subject yourselves to regulations, do not touch, do not taste, do not handle, which all concern things which perish with using according to the commandments and doctrines of men? These things indeed have an appearance of wisdom and self-imposed religion, false humility, neglect of the body, but are of no value against the indulgence of the flesh. Chapter 3, verse 1, if then you were raised with Christ, seek those things which are above, where Christ is, sitting at the right hand of God. Set your mind on things above, not on things on the earth. Verse 5, therefore put to death your members which are on the earth, fornication, uncleanness, passion, evil desires, covetousness, which is idolatry. Okay. And so, in thinking about our hymn, his yoke is easy, his burden is light, comes from the verse, I mentioned it yesterday or the day before, come unto me, all you who are weary and heavy laden, you'll find rest for your souls. Take my yoke upon you and learn from me. And we have to come to the Lord and learn from him. The Jews, that's what the Jews had to do. And as far as the Judaizing influence on the Gentiles, this is what the Gentiles were going to have to do too. Because the Judaizers, they were saying, oh, you got to go back, you got to be circumcised. You gotta keep these, you gotta keep the dietary laws. And they had to come to the Lord and take his yoke upon them. The Jews had to do that. We have to do that. And so, you had this philosophy. You had this Jewish philosophy, ideology stemming from the old law, but the old law was nailed to the cross. And Now, as far as application goes, you follow the Lord. You don't follow man's ways. Whether man's ways would be Jews trying to keep the old law, or man's ways like the pagans trying to keep pagan principles. Whatever it is, you follow the Lord. You follow the Lord, and ultimately, and you can make this point. Whatever the philosophy is, I think in the context it's talking more about the Judaizing influence. Whatever it is, let me put it another way. Let me put it another way. Verse 5 there. You know, when Jesus comes on the scene, there were a lot of disenfranchised Jews. You know, they weren't Pharisees. There were Pharisees and there were Sadducees and there were Herodians and there, all these other people. These sects. Let me put it like that. There were a lot of different sects. But then you know what? There were a lot of people that were just unaffiliated. They were Jews, but they weren't affiliated with any of the sects. And they were just living lives of sin. They were doing the things that are spoken about in verse 5. And so they needed to come to the Lord as well. And so when folks came to John the Baptist, repenting of their sin, confessing their sins, these are the sorts of people that were coming. The harlots were coming, for example, tax collectors and harlots mentions. And so I guess my point is, sometimes people subscribe to worldly ideologies, whatever those worldly ideologies are. But then sometimes people don't really subscribe to those ideologies. They just live for themselves, and they're caught up in just carnal sin. And whatever it is, whichever one of those parties, you come to the Lord and you learn from Him, and you learn different. And it is a better life. You have to recognize His authority. It is a yoke, but His yoke is easy. His burden is light, and you find rest for your souls. Men's ideologies, worldly living, you won't find rest for your soul. You only find that with the Lord. Appreciate you. Hope you have a good day. Join us tomorrow for another portion of our daily praise.